Welcome to the Embodiment podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. Welcome back to the Embodiment podcast. This is your host, Mark Walsh. So on this podcast, we look at all things beyond the brain taxi. So it's a podcast for yoga teachers, dance teachers, martial arts teachers, body workers, embodied coaches, body geeks of all kinds. So today's subject is centering. I'm going to take a pretty in-depth look at centering and self-regulation as an area. This is something I've been working with for a long time, but maybe let's start practically. So if you can, assuming this is one you can do with your eyes open. Obviously, if you're driving, keep paying attention to the road. If you're sitting, commuting, standing is also fine for this. So we'll do a quick ABC centering. So A is awareness. So become aware of your body. Feel your body. Take a moment to scan up and down, noticing sensations and also the other senses, any smells, sounds, what you can see. Balance your body. B is balance. Balance your posture, finding a balance between left and right, front and back, and you may want to sway either on your feet or in the chair. Finding a little more structural balance, down, up. Relaxing down, reaching up, left and right, reaching out, forwards and back. So we're balancing the physical body, but also our awareness. You're aware of the fact that, say you're inside, you have four walls, a floor and a ceiling. Or if you're outside, just those directions, you can imagine it as a sphere expanding, growing bigger, in all directions, equally reaching out, balancing our awareness and intention. C is core relaxation. So this is relaxing the eyes, looking a bit more peripherally, the mouth between the eyes, the tongue, throat, the chest, the belly, the lower abdominals. So we can breathe deeply. So the belly moves out as you breathe in. ABC. You could add another C. Who are you connected to? What do you care about? Remind yourself of your commitments. Why are you listening to this podcast? How does this relate to what you care about and people you care about? Bring them to mind for a moment. People that make you smile. Okay, so notice how you feel after that. I certainly feel more relaxed as your presenter, more focused too, more energized at the same time. So that's a technique we could call a centering technique. I'll go into a little bit about what that means shortly. Super useful. You may have your own. You may well have come across something like this in yoga or Pilates, in the martial arts. So Aikido was kind of the root for me of where I got centering from, first of all. You may have been taught it by a coach or a therapist of some kind. So centering techniques we could think of as ways to regulate ourselves. Ways to regulate ourselves. Specifically, we could look at reducing the fight-flight response, fight-flight-freeze response. I'll come more into that soon, and the grasping response, to get ourselves together, to regulate ourselves, to bring us back into a state of balance that may be useful for life. Why would we want to do this? Well, centering can help us make us happier, healthier, better relationships, and just more effective at whatever we're doing. Actually, I say this to people, I say, don't believe a word I say. When I'm teaching this in businesses or to yogis or to activists, people working in war zones, doing humanitarian work, I'll say, don't believe me, test this, do this technique, see if it makes a difference for you. So this podcast can be fairly experiential. There'll be several chances to try things and say, okay, did that actually make a difference to me? I kind of sell it to people. I say, look, do you have some stress in your life? Like everyone has stress, right? Do you act smart, compassionately, and creatively while under that stress? Almost certainly not. Do you sometimes want things or go for things or do things that you really shouldn't do, that you're going, I don't really want to do that, but you do it anyway? Most of us do, even if it's just occasional compulsive overeating, for example. We need to regulate ourselves. Sometimes centering it's kind of a bucket term. So I want to clear this up. I think It's used in the embodiment field very loosely, in a way in which I don't like that it's used so vaguely, sometimes very specifically, like in certain martial arts it refers to paying attention to the physical center of our body, the hara, the dantian, the center. So sometimes that's a much more specific use. I'm using it in a more general, broad sense, but I'm going to be specific about it. So why do this? Well, imagine there's a skill which can make you better at literally anything you do. It takes no more than a few seconds with practice, certainly no more than a few minutes. It's free. It's something you can use anytime, and you can teach to people that you love to help them as well. What could be better than that? On my courses, it's often people say this is one of the quick wins. This is one of the, I remember I was teaching a course in a university near here, one of my first clients, Sussex University, and I taught the librarian. A few years later, I was back in the organisation, and she was chief librarian. She came up to me and said, she didn't know my name actually. She said, what's your name? I said, Mark. She said, that centering, you taught the centering, that's really good. We do that at the beginning of all our meetings. It's really good. And then she breathed and sort of did an example of it. And I was like, wow, that's really impressive. Do you remember anything else from the training? She said, no, but that's changed my life. I was like, wow. Okay, great. So she took away this one thing from, years later, was able to still do it. And regularly it's rated on feedback forms as one of the sort of quick wins, whether I'm doing a leadership course, obviously a stress management or resilience course, extremely useful. Communication course. It's pretty much something I do on every course I teach because it doesn't hurt and actually makes things better. And so I first learned this in the martial arts, doing Aikido, and I quickly realised that it wasn't just good for keeping calm while fighting. It's a kind of prerequisite, keeping your head while people are trying to hit you, to responding effectively, but in fact could be used in the wider field. And since then I've used it in my life in many ways. I'll come to some stories perhaps related to that. Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at some notes here in front of me. Take a breath, take a pause. Yeah, so we can think of it specifically as working with fight, flight, freeze, the grasping response. More generally, just as any kind of desired state, so any kind of state management. And, we can all manage our state. A toddler would be someone that couldn't. If you see a toddler when they get frustrated, something happens they really want or really don't want, they throw themselves on the floor, they have the tantrums, the terrible twos. We can all do better than that, I hope, as adults, yeah? However, there are some more rigorous definitions of centering. We can get better at this skill, and it starts by knowing what it is. So this is Paul Linden, one of my teachers, who I think is probably the world expert on centering. I'd not very humbly say that I teach as good a class as anyone in the world on this subject, but Paul Linden is my teacher, and he's on this subject particularly good. So he says, centering is an antidote to the distress response. It is possible to prevent or overcome contraction by deliberately placing the body in states of freedom, balance, and expansiveness. Contrary to our customary ways of being, action is much more efficient and effective when the body is relaxed, free, and expansive. Generally, any activity, whether it's primarily physically, intellectual, emotional, or spiritual, will be done with greater ease and efficacy when the body is open. The centered state is a state of wholeness and integrity. It can be described in different ways. Speaking in structural language, the state of integrity is one where the musculoskeletal system is balanced and free from strain. Speaking functionally, this state allows stable, mobile, and balanced movement. Speaking in psychological terms, this state involves reaching out into the world as a symmetrical, expansive awareness and intentionality, while simultaneously staying anchored in the internal body realms, inner and outer aspect. Speaking in spiritual terms, this state is an integration of the body states of power and love. Speaking in ethical terms, this state creates an awareness of and a concern for the effects of one's actions on the well-being of others. We'll come back to that link to ethics later. Whatever terms we use, they refer to one and the same body-mind state. For some reason, it's easy and automatic for human beings to drop into the distress response, but centering needs to be learnt and practiced, and it needs to be engaged in voluntarily and deliberately. The key to centering lies in developing and applying body awareness. So, lots in that. Let's pick it apart over the next hour. Let's start with this as an experiment. Think of your best days and worst days, or the best and worst moments in your day or yesterday if it's early in the morning. What was the difference in you? Yeah, how would you describe you at your best rather than you at your worst? And when I say worst, that can mean unhappy, that can mean unethical. We tend to get mean when we're uncentered, to put it colloquially. It could mean just not very good at whatever tasks were important to you. Yeah, how did this affect your relationships? Often relationships go down the drain, and we'll see why later. Yeah. So what was the state for you? What was the physical state you're in when you're at your best and when you're at your worst? So this is according to your values, right? So it's not sort of a moral judgment from me here. You might also ask yourself, listening to this, why should I center? Where might that be helpful in my life? Like if you're going to take the time to listen to a podcast, I'm planning this is going to be an hour or maybe a bit more than an hour. Why would you do that? Maybe there's something you can actually learn here. What's on offer on these podcasts is information. Sure, I'll give you some stories and some background and say some of the top teachers in the field, but also you can learn some skills or at least begin to learn some things which you can then practice. And I always say, be skeptical. You don't have to believe a word I say. Alrighty, so centering, another way of looking at this is an aspect of embodied intelligence. So this basic skill of embodied intelligence, we can say, how am I? Being aware of your body. It's based on that. Most centering techniques, but not all are bodily. Yeah. So knowing how you are is the basis to going, oh, look, I'm all fucked up. I need to sort myself out. Yeah. Going, oh, look, I'm angry. That's not really helping this conversation with my wife. I might want to go calm down a bit before I continue this conversation. It might be like, oh, I'm scared. I'm not actually speaking up for myself in this meeting. I'd actually like to be. So then I can regulate myself to get a bit more courage. Yeah. The thing is, just telling someone not to be scared or to be courageous or, to be less angry doesn't work. You go up to two guys who are about to fight, and this is a classic, and you say, calm down. They don't, yeah, because it doesn't help them. There's not a method, I sometimes say, Jesus said, love thy neighbor. And I was like, as a kid, I was like, well, that's a nice idea, but how do I do that when I'm like angry and screaming at my friend, yeah? Yeah, so in terms of, centering in my own life, there's different routes of centering. I was just doing some Alexander technique lessons, and they were doing a lot of what could be called centering. In dance movement therapy, you'll come across it. In all this sort of Asian martial arts and yoga and the like, you'll come across it. So I think of it as this episode of bringing these all together. Yeah, for me, it was a University Aikido club where I first learnt it. The story I tell is that, I was at an exam on stress, and I was stressed because if I failed this exam, I was going to get kicked out of university. And I thought, oh God, I hadn't really been doing the work. I'd been doing far too much martial arts, not enough studying. And I thought, oh my God, what do I do? And I noticed I was panicking and stressed about that. And then I thought, hang on a minute, even if I had read all the books on stress, that wouldn't help me with the stress I'm in now. So what I did was a simple breathing technique, classic pull-in thing. I let the belly relax. So centering can be as simple as let the belly hang loose, let the tongue be loose in the mouth, yeah? Took a breath and got on with what I need to do and managed to scrape a pass. For me, quickly realised that centering was helpful doing martial arts out of there. And, for example, like dating, I was not long into the world of sort of romance and dating, and I found centering very helpful for kind of going on dates when I was a bit nervous, calming myself down, right through to really extreme situations. A few years after university, my best friend at university, Rachel, very, very sad. She jumped off a Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol. I found myself getting emotional talking about it, actually. She had what's called a psychotic break. Basically, she went nuts overnight. No one really saw it coming, and she jumped off the bridge. And, I went to see her family and her sisters afterwards, and I'm talking to them, and it's really hard. And I'm aware there's some sort of psychological skills I have that might be useful, in a small way you can to the family in that situation. Being asked to speak in that situation. A good friend of ours was asked to speak at the funeral, and I was trying to help her to do that because she was very triggered to do that. And this was a situation where I thought, wow, even just being 10% more together can really make a difference to people you love, So for me in that situation, it was where it's pressure tested in we might say the emotional domain for the first time. Years later, I was actually in a car crash, and the car was spinning, went off the road trying to overtake a lorry into a bean field at 60 miles an hour. I thought, okay, the car's collapsing around me, it's spinning, it's turning around. I thought, I'm dead here, So I thought, I might as well center. And I centered and relaxed and got hit, I think unconscious for a moment, managed to get out of the car. The car was a wreck. I was in a little survival space that hadn't collapsed, which was very lucky. And then, the emergency services came and they said, you're lucky to be alive. And I'm not saying centering saved my life, but I think it might well have done. And certainly working in areas of conflict, having guns pointed at me and difficult things happen to me, centering was definitely helpful a number of times there. I've seen it being useful for my clients, whether it's corporate clients, we're giving a presentation, or corporate clients that get nervous when they've got to speak to the board. activists to be a bit more centered when they can speak in a way which becomes more compelling and less angry, for example. What else? Save someone's life by centering. I was in Egypt with a colleague, and we almost accidentally got someone killed from a government minister by saying the wrong thing. Long story, but basically I went into the toilets and centered and came back to the dinner I was having with this Egyptian minister and his Cleopatra-esque wife and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I said that. We didn't quite mean to say that. It's not such a big deal. You don't really need to disappear that person." Yeah. So these are extreme examples, but often it's just day-to-day examples. Helping as a gay teenager who was bullied, that I was helping, stand up to people, or helping a young graduate from a Dutch telecoms company that was just a bit cocky, and it was turning people against her, or the shy one. It's actually the same company. There was two of them. One was a bit shy and one was a bit cocky, and bringing them both to a place where they could be heard and be influential in that company as kind of young super graduates. I've worked with people on the front lines, cancer care nurses and police and aid workers and all that sort of thing. But, this is something you can use day to day. My colleague Francis Bryce just wrote a piece for me about how it's useful as a parent to do the kind thing, to say the thing that you want to say to your children, rather than the reactive thing when you're tired of noise. Okay, so why do we need centering? What is a bad day? What does that do to us? Well, Buddhist frame here, you can think of centering in terms of being an antidote to our problems. So what the fundamental problem we all have is that stuff happens in life, and then we either dislike it, we're neutral to it, or we like it. Now that, so far, we don't really have a problem, do we? It's just common sense. This happens. What tends to happen when we're neutral to a stimulus, when we neither like or dislike it, is tend to ignore it. Yeah, and mindfulness can help with that. Now, if we're mindful of something we like or dislike, if we're not mindful, we're likely to be reactive. And as I said, we're losing compassion, we're using intelligence, we're using creativity, we're responding more from our animal brain. We'll come to the physiology a bit later. Not responding well or kindly. Yeah. So centering can be helpful to reduce the distress response. That's an aversive reaction in Buddhism. What Paul missed out, which I've added to his work, is also the eustress response, the grasping response. So in Buddhism, this is equally as important. From the martial arts, less important. The martial artists tend to miss this because they're mostly working with distress. Paul comes from the martial arts tradition. So a nice addition, it can also be centering around what we're grasping after. So the suffering for ourselves and often others is when we take pleasure or pain and we turn it into this aversive or grasping response, and centering is the antidote to that. All right, so there's a physiological response at this point. And again, don't believe me, let's try it. So if you're not driving or somewhere else, it would be dangerous. Close your eyes. And I'd like to think of someone annoying, irksome, difficult, not traumatizing. So not someone really hardcore, but just someone like 5 out of 10 annoying. Yeah. And I want you to notice as you picture them and hear their voice. Imagine how they sound and imagine them moving, the kind of things that they do. So really get a vivid picture of them. I'm going to be quiet for a minute to give you a chance to do that. What happens in your body? Specifically, what do you do in your body? Yeah, what do you do in your body? You probably didn't open and expand on all the things that Paul was talking about in his quote earlier. More likely you contracted. You may have tightened your belly muscles, for example. That's very common. Or your mouth. You may have noticed your feet or your hands tighten if you've got good spread body awareness. You probably noticed some difference that could be considered a very low level fight, flight, freeze response. Yeah, you may have noticed the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. If you want to do this with pleasure, please just get some. There's lots of ways to play with pleasure, but a simple one is wait until you're hungry and then find some food that you really want. Or I've got a cup of coffee in front of me here. It's actually decaf. When I was a caffeine addict, that was a very grasping response for coffee. And again, you'll probably notice a very similar tightening. The far less talked about grasping response is very similar to fight or flight response. It's a contraction, a twisting, a grasping. There's different flavors, like with guilt. Sometimes you turn away with guilt and shame. This has been classified as fight, flight, freeze, or sometimes fold. Fight would be going against something, away from something. This is using Karen Horney's psychoanalyst model. Then we can freeze, which is less well known. This can happen to people when they get shot at, or if they're sexually assaulted or something unpleasant like that happens. people can freeze up and actually not be able to move, which afterwards they can sometimes be embarrassed about or ashamed about even, and not realize that it's actually a physiological response. So, it's good for the police, for example, to know about this. If someone doesn't fight back when being assaulted, it doesn't mean they consent, And then we can have the fold response. This is often kind of later in the game, kind of learned helplessness. Often what happens is a sort of immediate freeze. Like when let's say there's a loud noise, like bang, So an immediate freeze, there's a turning of attention towards that thing. Usually you try and get away. If you can't get away, you fight. And if you can't fight and you'll become helpless, then this chronic freeze or even this fold, this collapse response can happen. I was in the Cat Cafe in Moscow recently, and I'm not sure how I feel about cat cafes, but it was a cute place for a meeting. So I had a meeting in there with a girl I know who likes cats a lot. And I'm in there and there's all these cats and, I try and stroke a few of them and I try and be sympathetic. But some of them will, react in a kind of fighty way. They look at me like they're going to claw me. Others would run away. Fair enough. And some would be kind of like they'd obviously been there too long and been overstroked by lots of enthusiastic young children or whatever. And you'd stroke them and they just wouldn't do anything. And I go, oh, that's really sad. That's a kind of learned helplessness fold response, that kind of collapse in the body. You see that bit with teenagers sometimes, that kind of collapse in the body. These responses are short-term but can become more long-term. That's one definition of trauma, actually, is where these responses get locked in the body. And we also have a baseline level of arousal. So, depending on just your personality or what you eat, how much coffee you have, if you live in a city, when I'm in London, my baseline level of arousal just for rushing around all day is much higher and makes it much easier for me to go into that fight-flight response. I don't know if I've been on the beach chilling out in Mallorca for a couple of days and I'm nice and relaxed, yeah? So these are the responses we have, and I said the grasping response, which is like that. I'm not going to go too much into the biology or the neuroscience of it. I think people often blag this and it can be done badly, and I'd be concerned that someone much better educated than I in that field would correct me on that. But obviously there is a physiological response, things like ACTH in the pituitary gland, cortisol and adrenaline hormones involved, noradrenaline being released, physiological things like the heart rate increasing, tunnel vision, hearing actually reduces. So it's not just you become less empathic emotionally, it's actually physiologically you hear less when you're in that response. And this might go to like dry mouth, butterflies in the stomach, digestion changes, under extreme situations the bladder may actually relax and you wet yourself. And obviously there's an evolutionary reason for this fight-flight response. If you're just doing pure physical movement, such as running as fast as you can or hitting someone with a club, this can be quite adaptive in that it fires us up into this particular mode. However, it's not adapted for modern life. I sometimes do a demo with this. I'm walking around a room, I say, imagine a lion jumps out of you. A lion jumps out. What do? You run away, you kill it, or you freeze so it eats someone else. Yeah, pretty adaptive for a lion. Problem in the modern world, of course, is there are no lions. This is why zebras don't get ulcers. There's a whole book on this. In the modern world, maybe it's your boss or your wife, and instead of attacking you physically, they say, "I don't like what you did yesterday," or "That report's rubbish," or they just give you a dirty look, maybe. And we respond. We have the same system, evolutionary-wise. We're conservative in a way, evolutionary, and we reuse systems. So we're using this system with social pressures. And we go into this fight-flight response in ways that aren't appropriate, and it doesn't help, You generally don't kill your boss or run away out of the room from your boss when he says you did something you don't like. That would be fairly extra. Or stand there, freeze response. I've done that with girlfriends and it doesn't help. Just be like, Generally, we want to respond in a way which is connected, compassionate. The fight-flight response is also antagonistic to the social engagement system. So what this means is we become less empathic at times when we need to be more empathic, yeah? In some ways, it's really bad evolutionary design for our modern world. It will come to social centering as a way of actually reducing that as well. But what happens is when we're in this response, we don't really want to connect with people. And that can, make us just mean, right through to really treating other people very, very badly. Is one reason how trauma can perpetuate in a way there as well. Polyvagal theory, Stephen Porges has looked at this. That's well worth a look. Bessel van der Kolk is useful to kind of read his stuff on this. Amy Matthews from the yoga world says some good stuff about this. So yeah, I'm looking at the research on this in front of me here. Yeah, sometimes it's associated with sympathetic and parasympathetic. That's not quite right. Generally, it'll be the sympathetic nervous system, which is speeding us up, but it's not just like the fight-flight nervous system. It's much more than that. Parasympathetic action via the vagus nerve to slow us down. But I'd be say that one is active and one is passive is wrong. There's a bit more to it than that. I've just written a book on this, actually, a small ebook on centering, which will be out fairly soon if it's not already. And there's a section in that from my colleague Anouk Brack, who's a biologist, and I think I'd rather leave it to her. You know, people talk very simply about, say, the three brains theory, which is very out of date, and they'll say things like, you know, the neocortex gets turned off, and the amygdala hijacks the brain, and the reptilian brain takes over. And, you know, that's not a bad way of explaining it. It's a very simple metaphor. It's a very simple way of explaining it. Physiologically, you know, any serious neuroscience scientist is going to laugh at that and say, no, there's way more going on. It's not quite like that. But it's not a bad way to think about this if you're a beginner. So the part that makes you smart and kind gets effectively turned off, not literally, but to some extent, you know, maybe blood flow is reduced or whatever it is. And the more primitive, if you will, part of you takes over. So, you know, that's a very crude version of the biology. So the triune brain theory you need to be a bit careful with. But that gives you some grounding in it. And I found that can be good enough for beginners in terms of looking at what's going on there. Okay, so you may have noticed this in yourself. Either today, I invite you to be aware of this in your life, noticing your baseline arousal level, for example, you know, how much stimulant you use. You know, if for me, there's lots of things that can reduce baseline arousal, like touch and social support and having a bath every night, you know. That's not centering. So relaxing, keeping relaxed in your life isn't centering. That's just how we get to a place where centering might be easier for us. You know, it's not like in a meeting I can suddenly go and have a hot tub, can suddenly go have a spa, you know, in the middle of a meeting, or do a yoga class. We need something quicker, and that's the beauty of centering, that it's something that can be done in the moment. I don't have to go away and stop what I'm doing. Good centering, like the ABC technique I taught you, that might take 2 or 3 minutes at first. Eventually, you can get it to 2 or 3 seconds. Wendy Palmer has some very good centric techniques. She calls them lizard push-ups, where you're basically expanding the extensor muscles in your body. She's influenced a lot by Amy Cuddy's work on power poses, which has been somewhat questioned now, but it's still worth a look. Amy Cuddy's got a book out called Presence, based purely on this, and it's very interesting. And firing these extensor muscles, standing up a little straighter, paused, you know, 1 second technique might be relax the mouth. That's it. I remember him telling me a story once. He said he was going through immigration back into the States where he lived from a trip to the UK where I've been hosting him. And, you know, it's a complete madhouse in there, and it's really stressful. And the guy behind the counter is like, what do you do for a living? And he's like, somatic educator. And they're like, well, what the hell is that, you know? Excuse my American accent. And he says, relax your tongue, let your tongue hang loose. And the guy goes, very good, stamp, go through. And obviously this guy was just stressed, and he was, you know, treating Paul a little bit disrespectfully, but just by giving him that one simple technique, the guy got it and was able to do it immediately. Yeah, so sometimes it is as simple as relaxing the belly. The key thing here is these states are incompatible with this fight, flight, freeze, fold, or flop response. Yeah, they're incompatible. There's one more we could talk about, which is fawn, which is going towards someone and kind of sort of that sort of social niceness. It's kind of like friend, but without the authenticity. There's some people have said there's gender differences in this. I'm not convinced by that, but that's another one we could look at under stress. People sort of, you know, look after me, be my friend, be the authority figure, I'm nice to you, kind of placating response we might see as well. Towards response, Melanie Klein called that. Okay, so what else? The culture of reactivity. So we can talk about the wider culture, that this is just endemic in the world. You know, there's a culture of being reactive the whole time, and in traumatized places even more so. You might say we're all traumatized to some extent, but there's definitely countries where it's worse. You know, someone in Afghanistan said to me, they said, wow, young people get so angry so easily today. People get so angry so easy today. That's what he said. And I was like, wow, you know, trauma's so endemic in Afghanistan. There's been so much war and suffering that it's, it's become normal to be readily triggered in that way. Yeah. Alrighty, so we've got this hyper response, hypo response, the hyper, the fight flight, the hypo, the freezing or the collapse. So good centering needs to address this. And the key thing here is centering techniques are incompatible with these. Yeah. So in the same way as the fight flight freeze fold response reduces awareness, acceptance, intention, changes our imagery, relaxation, reduces our structure, stops us moving, and reduces our responsiveness, we can use all those as tools for centering. So once you know what you're doing, you can undo it. I sometimes talk about true centering. So true centering is where you get really specific about your individual response and then undo it piece by piece, because there's some individual differences in it. There's a basic cross-cultural pattern. I've taught this in 30 countries all over the world, and one I use from Paul is tissue throwing. I throw tissues at people as a very safe, non-traumatizing trigger, and they go, "Ugh," and they have a response of some kind. You can even do it on Skype, actually. It's amazing. And there's, levels up from that, but we'll go into that later. And interestingly, all over the world, people have the same basic responses. Some cultural factors, but pretty much the same stuff. Whether they're Ethiopian kids or Brazilian businessmen or Swiss executives, it's all the same stuff all over the world. And I've tested that in many, many countries. I've thrown a lot of tissues at a lot of people, and you see the same stuff everywhere. Yeah. So centering is anything which is incompatible with that. So you're telling someone not to do anger is like, well, how, right? But you can tell them relax your belly, expand, have this sense of reaching out. We'll talk about your language needs to be what's called operational, which means that you're giving people the exact instructions, the how, the methodology, yeah, rather than just, sometimes you hear instructions like expand your energy to the four corners of the universe, and it's like, well, how? I remember I was in a coaching session with a very well-known American teacher that was in the UK. It's like a masterclass, and there was a sort of experienced Scottish life coach there. And she told her to do that, extend your energy to the four corners of the universe. And she was just like, how do I do that? And she didn't know. And that's actually a fair question, isn't it? And she just wasn't, we can guess, and you might have some sense of what that might mean. But often we need to break things down and say, okay, what I mean is this. And maybe give people a physical experience or a visualization or a specific instruction with the body. But it often needs to be more specific and not using metaphorical language or outcome-based language. Like just telling someone to relax doesn't really help. So if I knew how to relax, I would have done already. So the key thing is we're giving people instructions that create a state which is incompatible with this fight-flight response. It moves it out of the way. It's like you can't do star jumps and say I'm depressed. You could try that, by the way, if you wanted to say I'm depressed and do a bunch of star jumps. It doesn't fit together. Yeah. So the same with having a relaxed belly or this expansive awareness. It just doesn't fit with being angry or scared. So there are loads of centering techniques. The vast majority of them are based on mindfulness. So if we think of mindfulness as being in the present moment, being aware in a non-judgmental way of how things are, it's a good enough definition as any. That mindfulness is the foundation, because if we don't know what's going on, we can't do anything about it. Yeah. However, centering is more than mindfulness in that we deliberately change our state. So in centering, as well as just saying, oh, look, I'm all fucked up, or, I'm stressed, whatever it is, we then do something about it. Yeah, so that's where I'd say embodiment generally, but also centering specifically differs from mindfulness, that we actually say, yeah, I'm going to do something here. I'm not just going to be aware. Now, of course, just being aware of yourself will actually already start to have a centering effect. You can't help it. It's just awareness is relaxing. It's like someone puts your hand on your back and you become aware of the tension and then you let it go because of the awareness the hand brought. However, we're actually deliberately doing this in centering. Most centering relies upon body awareness. There is some external centering. So, for example, you can try this now. This is a good, nice, safe one to do. Listen all around you in 360 degrees. So up and down, left and right, forwards and back, listening, actively listening all around you. And you can pick out things like, I can hear my computer, my chair, car on a road far away. I'm listening all around me, and this can create this nice expansive state. Yeah. Equally, owl eyes. This is one from Dr. Adrian Harris. He's an eco-psychologist I know, who I work with on Nature Connection workshops sometimes. We have a course called EFC, and he does the Nature Connection part of the Embodied Facilitator course. Great guy, Adrian. Look up his stuff. He's got some nice portals. Body, Mind, Place. Adrian Harris, Harris. Look him up. He's got great portals on embodiment stuff generally. But he's really interested in connecting to nature, how the body, and I'll do a whole podcast on this, how the bodies can, we'll get him in for an interview too, actually, how the body's connected to nature, and how we connect through nature and how nature makes a difference to us. So he's often using these external centering techniques. For example, owl eyes is where you're just peripheral in your vision. Like, you can do this now. Take up as, careful if you're driving, whatever. Take up as much, see as much as you can. And if you're not sure how to do that, you can put your fingers together, your two index fingers together, and then gradually, slowly draw them apart while looking ahead and keeping the index fingers in your peripheral vision. And that's quite amazingly relaxing, actually. it's the difference, when you're kind of relaxed, you have this nice open vision, just taking in the world. And as soon as something scary or something you want to kill, when you're aggressive happens, your eyes go into this kind of scared or hateful mode of being very focused, which incidentally is how your eyes are every time you look at a small computer screen. Yeah, you're actually training your eyes, training your whole embodiment into a hateful or scared mode by just looking straight ahead. Opening up this horizontal awareness can also have this sense of building inclusivity. The sort of horizontal have this sort of social inclusive domain where you're more able, rather than being like, here's what I want, or here's my point, or that goal orientation of the sagittal forwards and backwards domain. The horizontal can really open us up. I've heard several speakers talk about that, one on the Liberated Body podcast recently, but there's been several. Yeah, so that's another good thing the external centering is good for, is building this peripheral awareness. Otherwise people get very in there. It's me, and it's just me and myself and in my body. And it can be a bit weird. It can be cut you off from other people, these kind of centering robots that have just done the external. So, Paul's emphasis is on reaching out externally. And he teaches it in terms of intentional awareness and extension. Hard thing to teach on a podcast. I'd break that down if we were in a workshop. And rather than simply body awareness, there's two aspects to this. Yeah, these external techniques can be good if people are traumatized and the body just doesn't feel like a safe, happy place to go. So it's a way for them to regulate before going to the body, which sooner or later is a good place to end up and to work with. But at first, they may need to regulate not by going to the body, which may be full of overwhelming sensations. Yeah. I think a key thing here for us as human beings is we can also uncenter ourselves. So, imagine a gazelle gets chased by a lion. That's scary for them. But they don't sit there afterwards, so they get away, going this shaking thing, which kind of trauma release. But they don't sit there afterwards going, oh my God, what if there's bigger lions tomorrow? And what if all the grass runs out? And, remembering the lions from the past, because we're able to remember and project so effectively, we have this virtual reality system. That's how we stress ourselves out so much. And it's, most of the bad things in my life that I've got stressed about have never actually happened. They've only been imagined. Yeah. I had someone talking about me, bad things on the internet about me yesterday, and sometimes happens. And, someone told me about it on Facebook Messenger, and I thought, do I want to go look at it? And I was imagining all these bad things that were going on. And I just went, sod it, and, came back to my body and let go of it. Yeah. Centering techniques come in different flavors, different kinds, often based, as I said, on mindfulness. But then it's like, where do you go for that? Are they the hypo or the hyper ones? So are they dealing with the shut down? In which case you might actually need any more energizing and expanding. It might be a chest breath rather than a belly breath. Or more typically, are they to do with when we're hyper aroused, we're in that fight flight response and we need to calm down? That's more typical, but one size does not fit all. I have a friend of mine, a good trainer I know that I work with, when he gets stressed, he sort of shuts down and gets very dense, he calls it, kind of closes down and stops responding. Well, relaxation might not be what he needs. Equally, the kind of teenager who's kind of slumped, the stereotypical kind of powerless teenager, again, it might not be relaxation they need in that point. It might actually be a bit of extension, a bit of structure, feeling their bones, aligning their bones with gravity. So yeah, two very different ways of doing it that we were looking at there. Yeah. Okay, what else can we have in terms of centering? Well, there's three main types of centering. We can look at. We've got direct embodied intrapersonal aspects. So that's one kind of centering. And this is when we directly work on our own body, for example, relaxing the belly. And we can talk about wake up versus relaxation centering within that category, the hypo or hyper, or dual techniques, which kind of do both. And that's often like with ABC, like balance is a kind of cheat, right? Because it's like, well, if you're a bit down, you need to go up, then you go up. If you're a bit up and you need to go down, grounding, we might say metaphorically, don't like that word, so it's a bit vague. Then both work. So that's a dual method. And then we have the true individual adapted centering, which would be like looking specifically what you do in a fight flight response and not doing that, doing something else, right? Doing the opposite. Yeah. So that's the kind of adapted method. There's two more categories. That's the first category. That's all direct embodied intrapersonal. This is all in my ebook. If you want this, you can find this at embodiedfacilitator.com. If not now, then a couple of months' time, by the time I've got it edited. Depth centering, that's the second aspect. So this is where we look at meaning. What do I care about? Strozzi was the first person that I saw do this. I don't see many people do it. I see some. He's really good at this. Richard Strozzi, heckler. So depth centering is where he says, for the sake of what? I'm good on the American accents today, right? So depth centering is where we look at what what's meaningful, what matters to us, what do I care about, what am I committed to? Yeah, it's another C. You may have heard that at the beginning of the ABC. The interpersonal aspect. So this is one that I've been really working with. Therapists talk about this a lot. So the interpersonal aspect would be what they would call the therapeutic alliance, I believe they call it. So I could be wrong there. So it's this aspect of that people are relaxing. So if a baby is crying, we don't come up to it and tell it to relax its belly, right? We hug it, we love it, we talk to it, we use a reassuring voice, we let it know it's not alone. So this is the basic way we actually learn to self-regulate, is via someone else. And if you're stressed and your friend isn't, now you're either going to make them stressed, but if they can hold the kind of sentence space, them just looking at you sympathetically can be helpful. You know, I was doing a big talk in Russian. There's like 1,000 people in this auditorium in Moscow University, and I was a bit stressed, so I put a couple of my friends in the front row, Vilya and I forget the other one, and I just looked at them and I just smiled and they smiled back at me. I looked in their eyes, and if I ever got nervous, it was just that reassurance, like, oh, there's someone here who cares about me, there's someone I like. There's loads of ways you can do this. I'll come on to some more methods in a minute. So they're the basic methods, and then you've got a million techniques, yeah? I could talk about it all day. I think how long have we been going for already? Quite a while, I think, actually. Yeah, haven't we? Quite a while. Lengthening the out breath is just a very simple one you'll see in yoga, scientifically proven to reduce cortisol levels, to reduce that response. Smoothing the breath is another one, yeah? So rounding out the breath so it's seamless rather than has this stop-start. Relaxing the spine, making it a bit more concave, a bit more flexed rather than convex, kind of pushing the chest out, so relaxing the spine. And the core relaxation, that, if I was to just pick one, you know, that's it. That's the C of my ABC. The eyes, the tongue, the chest, the abdominals, lower abdominals, the genitals, right down to the feet. You can talk about the different... Francis Bryars, one of my colleagues, talks about the different diaphragms. So we'll talk about, you know, the one in the throat, the one in the actual diaphragm, the lower abdominals, the pelvic floor, and more abstractly, the top of the head and the bottom of the feet, right? So these are diaphragms that are all worth relaxing. So that core relaxation... Try any of those now. Yeah, I just noticed I was a little bit like, tiny bit anxious just because of time and going over time, not in a big way. You know, we often have these little fight-flight response. Like then I wasn't like, oh my God, scared, but that slight anxiety, which means I'm not going to do my best as a presenter for you guys, yeah? So grounding is a term you'll often hear. What does that actually mean? Well, sometimes it means feel your feet. Sometimes it means lower your center of gravity slightly by bending your knees. Sometimes it means bring your awareness to the lower half of your body. Use a supportive visualization, like having tree roots, for example. I like that one. Extending down, we'd have to go into what extending is, but you know, there's different techniques for that. Sometimes it's just pausing, balancing the posture. Obviously, the key idea here is just sort of lining up the bones. So, you know, the bones and the fascia are kind of doing the work in posture rather than the muscle. That's very easy to feel, actually. If you stand up, if you're not already, and you put a hand on your back, if you lean forwards, you'll notice the muscles on the erector spinae around the spine will actually have to contract. That's just logical because you'd fall over otherwise, yeah? Being aware of your center of gravity, that's a little misdone because the center of gravity in physics literally can move. It's not always within the body. However, the Ki Aikido people, Aikido people could look at Ki testing. There's loads of good stuff on that. Soothing the body by stroking. You can tense and relax. What else? Shaking the body. That's a bit of a dual centering technique, actually. Squirm and settle, tapping techniques like EMDR. Water is an interesting one, like splashing water on your face. It's not quite centering because it relies upon an external cause, but drinking a sip of water, or in my case now coffee, and noticing the sensation as it goes down, where that sensation ends. Talked about peripheral awareness, talked about visualizations, and do a whole other podcast on visualizations another time. What else? Oh my God, I'm looking at a list here and it just goes on and on and on. I'm sure you've got loads of your own. Maybe if you're looking at this in the Facebook group, you could share some of your own and put them in there. Yeah, and then we've got the wake-up centering. So that might be the chest breath, you know, focusing on the in-breath rather than the out-breath, the convex spine, engaging the musculature by pushing and pulling, the ujjayi breath that you'll see in some styles of yoga. Some of the jumping up and down, landing on your heels. It's where you come up onto your tippy toes and then land down on your heels, and it creates this kind of invigorated feeling in the whole body. Again, there's loads and loads and loads. And the dual ones, the kind of cheat ones, like balancing your posture, balancing your awareness all around you, using targeted imagery, What else? Shaking seeds. This is a nice one. I think I got this from Idiokinesis, which is a nice system where you imagine your body's kind of a bag full of lentils or dry seeds or beans, and you shake it, and the visualization is you're getting the lentils or beans spread equally across your body. That's a really nice one. There's other techniques that could be related to centering, like EFP and acupressure, those kind of things, and you can have a system to help with kind of true individual adaptive centering. Like we talk about 4 elements. So it's like, okay, if they've gone very earthed, they need more air. What's that? That's a metaphor. That might be more up. If they've gone very backwards, very water, they might need a bit more fire. What is that? It might be forward and breathe in a particular way, etc. Yeah. With clients, if I'm working with a group, you have to kind of be doing an overhead like ABC, which is kind of just hitting everyone with the dual centering. But obviously with individuals, if you're coaching someone, you can observe and even better help them observe. Yeah. So I'll often use a scale like, tissue throwing is a good place to start. Some people use grabs, but I think that's a little bit much for people if they might have a trauma background and you're not aware of it. So if I was going to use a grab or a shout, you can work up to that. And the key thing here is that this is what I teach, the principle of centering rather than any one of these techniques. The principle is that you help, or the algorithm as Paul calls it, is you're helping people identify their distress response by giving them a minimal trigger, a minimal stimulus. So starting low and then increasing that if this minimal stimulus isn't enough to the point where they have some response. And when they do, you can say, okay, notice that. What did you do in your body? The language is important because it builds in responsibility. It makes them aware they're not a victim of it. There's an ethical principle here, which is that you're not telling people I'm the boss and I know about your body. The ethical principle here is that you're helping them become aware of what they're doing and take responsibility for that. Yeah. So, the joke is sort of like not, you see like angry people saying, you made me angry. It's like, well, more technically you did anger in your body. Yeah. And I'm not saying that it's not victim blaming. I'm not saying that if you're scared, it's your fault. Obviously, if you don't have the resources, you don't know how to do anything differently, but you are doing it. That's why I can say one thing to 2 people and one will become angry and one won't. Well, it's obviously not the words, just the words. It's the interpretation. It's the person that's then unconsciously doing that in their body. So we need to help people understand that this is what's happening so they can then do something about it. So helping people identify that response in themselves, as I did with you guys with a visualization, that's another gentle way to work. And you can work up to grabbing people or grabbing them from behind, or swords if they're martial arts. When I'm working with soldiers, for example, you have to do some pretty hardcore things, pulling on their beard or kissing on the cheek. That works pretty well. And I'm always getting consent with each stage. I'm not kind of doing these things randomly. I'm saying, can I do this? Yeah. Sometimes the social pressure works. I remember I was teaching one time on a stage, there's a couple of hundred people looking at me, and I got a volunteer and they came up to the stage, and they turned around, they saw the audience and they just froze. And I'm like, okay, you don't need a tissue throwing at you. You're in a freeze response already. Yeah. What else? You can do this creatively. So once you understand this, you can use whatever works. Like, let's say you can't touch people. You're working with populations, say, I don't know, a strict Muslim or Jewish population where you couldn't touch people. If you can't, or a corporate environment where people just don't, they're scared of touch, you can use a clap. Yeah. I saw one of my colleagues did this using water pistols, with kids in a summer's day. I did this in, where was I? Lithuania. We had snow and we got people to walk barefoot, first of all outside and then on gravel, then on snow, and then in deeper snow. And they give them this graded possibility. It needs to be graded. It needs to have increasing level, but controlled in small steps. Too little, nothing happens. You don't learn anything. Too much, traumatize people. That's not kind or ethical. So having a graded scale, a common one for me would be tissue at the belly, tissue at the face, tissue would shout, grab from the wrist, grab the shoulders from behind. That would be levels 1 to 5. It's not a competition, I tell people. And it's the minimal one that causes the minimal response. I've got loads of videos on YouTube about centering. Put in Mark Walsh centering, got loads of videos that will show you some of this. But again, they're not the only ones, right? You could work with, verbally, we work with insults, for example. We'll get people to choose an insult or a criticism or something, or sometimes a compliment if they don't like compliments. And then they scale it. So again, they start with something quite gentle, and then we might get them to stand closer or say it in a different tone of voice, like whiny or shouty, or to add something to it, so we get them to calibrate. This is the principle of calibration. If you want to do centering safely, you need to learn that. Then you add the centering technique. Could be any one of the things I've just described, and they see how it's different. And the beauty of this is people don't have to believe you. The beauty of this is people can go, wow, that actually really worked. And I've seen quite cynical business people. I always say, look, be skeptical, don't be cynical, try it. And they go, wow, that was totally different. Before I flinched and now I didn't. They see the physiological response, the it response. They also notice the I response. They're like, oh, I didn't really feel bothered that time. Yeah. Or the we response is they're like, oh, I didn't hate you so much. It's like the relationship improved. That's a bit harder to spot. But the I, the we, and the it are all damaged through these fight, flight, freeze, and grasping responses, and they can all be helped through centering. Okay, so we've got the physical stuff, meaning, working with meaning. What matters to me? Do this now. Just say to yourself, what am I committed to today, to doing today? What I value about what I'm doing next is this, yeah? What matters to me right now in listening to this podcast is this. Notice the effect that has on your body. You can use strategies for the sake of what? Yeah? What do I serve? Just why am I doing this? What's often a better question than why? Yeah, so depth, working with depth is a really important and often unmissed one. So I recommend giving that a go. Inquiry centering is, Wendy Palmer uses, rather than saying this, she's asking a question. It's a really nice method. She'll say, what would a bit more ease be like? What would she says a little bit's good because the system can handle a little bit more. I found this to be the case. What would a little bit more structure be like? A little bit more relaxation, a little bit more kindness, extension, whatever it is. Another exercise you can think of is like, don't do this in reality, but how would you start a fight with someone? How would you actually do everything in your own body that would make it most likely that you'd be antagonizing to them and that you'd be in a problem? So what would you do in your tone of voice, your body language, all that stuff? That's a little mental exercise. So don't do it in reality that you can work with there. Yeah. Okay, so the social, we're socially regulated. Stephen Porges talks about the myelinated vagus nerve and primary sympathetic nervous system. This relates to this. The therapeutic alliance is what therapists talk about in relates to this. And also it's just common sense, isn't it? That when you're stressed, you want to go talk to a friend. You want someone that cares about you. I've never seen it used in centering as much. I don't see it used in centering as much as I'd like. Most people don't know how to use it in a quick way. Yeah. So another ABC, if you like the ABC, is acceptance, belonging, and care. Yeah, so it's in any situation you could notice, how am I being accepted here? How am I belong, and how am I being cared about? Now, even in situations that might seem quite aggressive, there's a degree of acceptance. Maybe then people aren't physically attacking you, they're just verbally attacking you. How do I belong? Like, what do I have in common with people here? Even like, say, so you're talking to someone that's politically very different from you, you might be like, well, you like Donald Trump, I don't, but you also have children, you will also die, you also like sports, you also care about something. There's often something we can see in common with people, even if it's just a scared humanity. Another one, spiral, support, passion, inspiration, respect, appreciation, love. So looking for all those things, like how am I being supported right now? If there's no one literally supporting you, let's say you're in a situation which is pretty hostile, you can imagine someone, bring someone to mind. You can imagine their hand on your back. Try that now. Just close your eyes for a minute, assuming you're not driving, etc. Put a hand, imagine someone's hand that cares about you, alive or dead, on your back. Maybe it's someone famous you've never met. Maybe it's a parent, a good friend, a colleague, mentor. Putting that hand on your back, noticing what that does to you, yeah? Reminding yourself what you're passionate about, who inspires you, reminding yourself who inspires you, who you respect and who respects you. Look for the respect. There's often respect. Like if you're doing a talk and you're nervous, people are sitting there, they've come to see you, they're not talking over you, that's respectful. Look for that. What do you appreciate about the people, Like even if someone's like having a go at you, not in a good situation, you might go, you know what? You're actually a smart guy, even if I really disagree with you. Yeah. Where is the love, to use the phrase? Smiling heart isn't one Paul Linden uses. I think Wendy Palmer started using it now as well, which is to think of someone who makes your heart smile, or just makes you smile, if that's a bit hippie for you. Yeah. Try that now. Notice physiologically what happens. Visualize them, picture them, like we did with the annoying person, but with the one who makes you smile. I notice, for example, I breathe deeper straight away. My muscles in my chest kind of relax into each other. It can feel like the chest is melting. I think that's one reason people associate the heart, only one reason people associate the heart with love. Yeah. Smiling at strangers, noticing what you have in common, these are things I've discussed. The composite ABC centering can involve this as well as an extra C. Yeah. Sometimes I add D and E, which is definitely energized, and that's like imagining you're a star shining in all directions. For people with a bit more of a hypo kind of collapse response, they need not just the relaxation, but they need that extension. And visualization is like being a glowworm, or imagine your skin is warm and glowing in every direction. You can teach extension through teaching people something called unbendable arm. You can look at videos of me doing that online. Hard to do on a podcast, but there's ways to teach extension and then say, now do that with your whole body. Yeah. Imagine you're a glowworm is a classic that works pretty well. Or, you know, we do have to adapt visualizations to individuals. So, for example, if I'm working with someone who's very Christian, I might say, imagine you're an angel shining light in all directions. They might really like that. My atheist friend might not. Yeah, they might prefer, you know, imagine you're a Buddha. So there's different ways we can work with that, adapting the centering. Okay, so let's look at how do we practice centering intelligently. So it talks about applying low-level stressors, increasing in small steps, applying a centering technique, then gradually making it more realistic to the thing that in life might be stressing someone. Yeah. So I mentioned the tissue throwing, the wrist grabs. Again, these are all on video if you're interested in that. What else have we got? Thinking, I talked and put you guys through. I'm looking through, there's loads of potentials. Cold showers is a good one, because again, it's something you can control. Yeah, you can have it sort of warm and then gradually a bit colder. Yeah, cold showers is one I like to work with. It's quite advanced in some ways. Obviously, if you're doing a yoga class, you can do it in yoga. The postures you can adapt. So let's take chair posture or plank posture. These are both challenging postures, you know, warrior posture. You're likely to have a fight flight response in that posture that doesn't help you do it. Actually it stops you, makes it harder to do. And then this is why yoga teachers spend so much time saying, breathe, relax your mouth, relax your jaw, relax your forehead. That's basic centering. Yoga techniques like plank, where you have to engage the core to do the technique, are less helpful. I prefer to use ones that engage less of the center musculature. So something like just standing against the wall with your knees bent. You know, yeah, you have to use the quadriceps, but very little is involved. Or sitting on your toes, which can be a bit painful. It's not for everyone, but again, most of the body can be upright and relaxed. So it shows that when you tense that, it's not necessary for the posture. So it's the same reason when you're using grabs, you shouldn't push people around, because you don't know, you know, what's their response and what's you pushing them, right? You need to separate those two things out. So grabs in place are much better than pushes. You can work with pushes, but you can miss some of the response because it's hidden in just a physical response to being pushed. Yeah. Non-injurious pain, there's pressure points you can use, but be careful with that. But that's another way to work with it. I've talked about, you know, you could use fairground rides. You can use anything, you know, martial arts, asking, you know, I used to teaching some guys how to talk to, in a respectful way, how to talk to women. And for them, it's very nerve-wracking to talk to a beautiful woman, to say, hello, I thought you looked nice, do you mind if I speak to you? Was very nerve-wracking. So, you know, centering was not just an application there, but they could actually use that as part of their development. With children, it's very easy. You know, we do a thing about making them tickle-proof, and, you know, most children don't like the fact that they lose their own sense of power when they get tickled. So that's a good one to teach. With children with quite often, or I use scary dinosaurs or toys and things like that. Yeah. Okay, so I've talked about imagination, word association. You can use technology as well. So YouTube, you can often find some things that are triggering on there. It's a bit harder to control, but you might be able to get a scale, a graded scale on there. Talk about insults, simulators. That's an interesting one. That's, let's say, it's because we're symbolic creatures. If someone says, I really hate it that my boss is always looking over my shoulder, or I feel pulled in two directions, well, I would help them practice anything. I would literally look over their shoulder. I would take another person and have them pulled gently in two directions and actually simulate the metaphor they're talking about, the environment they're talking about. And that can be literal. You know, I remember one time I had anxiety about being controlled, and, you know, you could literally control someone like holding their wrists, or, you know, actually all that was necessary for me at the time was to have a bit of rope put on me, and it wasn't tying me up or anything. It was just placed on me, and I didn't like it. I had this thing about control at the time, being controlled. So we can use symbolically, or we can use more literally. They could literally tie someone up. We have to be a bit careful with that, obviously. The key thing here is consent and calibration. This is the thing I teach all my students on EFC and everywhere else I work. Before you start working with others, people really need to get it in their head that you can consent, and someone has to be capable to consent, obviously, and to calibrate and to reconsent at every point of recalibration. You know, they might be okay with a tissue being thrown at them, but not with having their face licked. That's one I use less often. Yeah. Games can be useful to work with this. Oh, with pleasure centering, I'm often using pictures of things people like. So we have a series of pictures of things people like, and I get them to find one that's not too kind of addictive around, one they can just work with. You don't want to go with cigarettes if that's someone's sort of, big addiction for someone. Working with pictures, you can work with food, you can work with touch, you can work with getting them to do a nice yoga technique they really enjoy and then stop doing it, yeah? So in a yoga class, you're constantly getting practice of if you enjoy the techniques, if you enjoy the postures, which I usually do, that of someone kind of going in and out of them repeatedly, yeah? There's something you can use called subjective units of distress, SUDs. So that's where you get people to rate and by a number before and after the technique. That can be helpful. All right, so in terms of principles of working with centering, the principle itself, the algorithm, we've talked about Goldilocks, not too much, not too little. That's the calibration, yeah. Empowerment and consent. So you're teaching people to be responsible, to be empowered. As you do this, and I'll often do something called the safety contract, which I got from Paul, which is to say, who's the boss? Who's in charge? What's the safety contract? And they'll say, me. Great. This is also they decide, what words to speak or whether to decrease the stimulus, not you. You've got to be careful with this because some people can be very compliant and have been taught consent in various ways. So you've got to be very careful of that. And if the body says no and the words say yes, I take that as a no. So if I say, hey, can I grab you? And they go, and like lean away from me and say, yeah, I'm like, are you sure? I can get another volunteer. It's okay. And then if they relax, they might say, oh, actually, yeah. Or they might say, actually, no. I go, fair enough. Get someone else. No problem. It doesn't bother me. The key thing is to help people go from evaluating to sensing in their language. So people might say, oh, I freaked out when you threw that tissue at me. Freaked out. And you might say, okay, that's nice. How did you freak out, or where did you freak out? So you get them to be specific. Did you freak out equally in your ear as your belly? Probably not. Yeah. Helping them with language to get that language of self-responsibility. Yeah. Sometimes we're helping people identify what we call somatic markers. So that's like little signs they're going into the fight-flight response. That can be really, really helpful. Really, really to sort of say, oh, as soon as I start to come forward, that's the beginning of me getting really angry. And it's much easier, the metaphor is it's easier to stop a car at 5 miles an hour than 50 miles an hour, right? If you too far down the river, if you've got the fight-flight response, the horror of it is it's numbing. So tension numbs us. It's dissociative. That's part of the function. So what that means is, as we get more and more triggered, we get more and more less likely to notice we're triggered. And you'll be that guy saying, I'm not angry, he just isn't even noticing they're angry. Everyone else has, but they haven't. So spotting it early, going in and out of it and noticing the initial, which might be the eyes or the genitals or the breath, these subtle indicators can be quite helpful. Doing things repeatedly is just really good. You kind of juice up a centering technique. You can anchor it around a particular thing. So you touch your hands together in a particular pose every time you do the centering. Sooner or later, you just need to touch your hands together. I remember finding this out, like your learning can be state dependent. So you've got to be a bit careful of that. I did all my centering in my Aikido clothes, and it was much harder to center not in my Aikido clothes, right? So that's what I discovered, yeah. Yeah, there's some deeper stuff here we could look at, like the payoffs of being uncentered identity. Like, I'm that kind of person. That's more the sort of psychotherapeutic domain. What I would say is, if you don't look at that domain at all, if you don't look at shadow, what we repress and deny and project, centering can become next to useless. It's really interesting. As someone that's done centering for 20 years, why is there still a couple of areas that I find it very difficult to center around? And that can change, It can be like, I was getting really triggered by something the other day about gender, and I was like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, this relates to my dad and my dad dying, and what that means to me, and masculinity. I was like, oh, there's a reason for that. It was a bit deeper. So if you do find places where you can't center, don't be too hard on yourself. It might mean you need to do a bit of sort of deeper therapeutic work around that. Yeah, and the beautiful thing here, of course, is that, as Junpo says, one of my Zen teachers, your angst becomes your liberation. You're reminded to center by the stressful thing. So nowadays, when something stressful happens, it's like up, center, reminds you to bring back to it. But like anything you need to practice, it's a skill. Centering for me is definitely got much easier. I told the story about that car crash at the beginning. There's no way I would have been able to center in that car crash had I not already done 10 years of centering practice through Aikido and other things. You do need places to regularly practice, whether that's yoga or Aikido or Tango or whatever you do. Yeah, you could talk about group centering. So this would be like group coordination practices, like the Maori haka, for example, or barn dancing even, or, everyone doing the same move at a rock concert. The Icelandic clap, if you haven't seen that. We could think of that as sort of group centering in a way. the key thing for me of centering here is to look specifically at what's happening and move to this empirical way of working when we're not asking people to believe anything or any weird abstract techniques, but we're actually looking at things like heart rate vulnerability, hormone levels, brain waves. There's lots of systems around there, around things like this. But even more than just looking at the science, it's getting people to test things. So cutting out of this belief-based model, for example, and it certainly, objectively it can be useful to say measure your heart rate. I have a Fitbit that does that, like a little wristband, but it's a subjective skill of learning what's going on that I think is important too. So I wouldn't get too caught in the gadgets here. Can you be too centered? That's an interesting question. Are there times you might not want to center? Very few, unless I'm really wanting to be sort of caught in passion. Centering is not natural. It's not something you naturally do. People may be naturally low level of arousal, but centering is something you consciously do. There may be times when you want to actually follow an emotional process and let it work out as a process. If I go 5 rhythms dancing, I'm not particularly centering. I'm wanting to allow and express the body. That's what we call freedom work rather than form work. Too much form work can lead people to be control freaks. Can lead people to be like centering robots. There's a near enemy, as the Buddhists say, of centering is to be like non-reactively, I don't care, like lacking expression, nothing bothers me, and I'd say that's a problem, because for me, true centering also has this relational involvement with other people. So be careful not to be a centering robot. You see that, or becomes a bit of a power trip. You'll see that for some martial artists. So they're the sort of near enemies in terms of being too centered. Well, no, but too kind of numb in this way of ignoring. Some people get very worried. They think, well, if I center, I'm going to miss my emotions. And I'd say, well, it's more about not being reactive to them. It's like the telephone rings and you get the message and you go, okay, I'm angry, I'm scared, and my needs aren't being met. That's really important, but you don't then go on to smash the telephone. It's just going, okay, great, thank you, telephone. And you're still feeling the emotion, you're just less reactive to it. That's my experience of centering. It's not about numbing out. That's how it could be misused if someone has trauma or wants to do that for another reason. So we need to balance centering with self-expression, with the skill of listening the body and letting it flow. It's not, this is one podcast, right? It's not the only skill of embodiment. A nice frame would be a thing like, what's the opposite of stress? People don't really talk about this. Maybe they talk about rest and digest, or is it rest and what's the other one? Something and mate. What's the opposite of stress? We could think about grace, optimal functioning or peak performance. That's a little dry for me. Grace I like, and there's actually a form of centering called grace, developed by George Leonard, who was one of the founders of this human potential movement. I tend to keep away from stuff around energy and centering because it has many meanings. It's not that, I don't want to get too controversial, but I tend to stay away from that and teach my students to stay away from that in terms of centering techniques. I've got different opinions from my colleagues on that one. So what can we finish with? Resources. So look at the ebook, look up Centering Mark Walsh, go to embodyfacilitator.com. If it's not up by now, it will be fairly soon. Get the newsletter, you'll get it. What else? Lots of videos on YouTube for free, loads of stuff there. In yoga, we look at embodied yoga principles. I teach centering. Paul Linden's got some great free ebooks. Wendy Palmer's got an app. There's an Elephant Journal article on centering that was pretty readable. If you wanted a short article, to put in Elephant Journal Mark Walsh. I would say, a key thing to finish with here is how can you use this in your actual life? How can centering be used in your actual life? So maybe just note down a couple of places where you could practice it in your life and a couple of places where you could apply it. It's important to have that distinction. I'll do another podcast on practice, that your practice and application are different things. So practice is the controlled conditions where the consequences don't matter. Applications is real life where the consequences do matter, and you can't tell your child to be 20% less annoying. So don't wait for life's challenges to practice centering. You need to practice in those control conditions in a regular, non-consequential environment. So I'd have a think, where can you apply it, but also where can you practice it? They're two different things. Whew. So that was over an hour. Hope you enjoyed that. Lots there. Yes, our second podcast. We've got guests coming up soon as well on future podcasts. So some podcasts will be like this. They'll be sort of me talking through a subject. Others will be much more guest driven. So if not the next one, then the next 2 or 3. In the next 2 or 3, we'll have one of the guests on, including people like Paul Linden, Dr. Adrian Harris, people that I've talked about. So it's been good. Signing out. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.